Hey there, super friends. It's Joey with Last Point Gaming. Today is Tuesday, December 12th, 2017. If you want to connect with us on social media, you can friend up our Last Point Gaming Facebook account. Follow us on Twitter at Last Point Gaming. Follow me personally on Twitter at Stranger Sparrow. Reach out directly with an email to lastpointgaming@gmail.com or go to our YouTube subscriber channel thing, Last Point Gaming. I gotta figure out how to more organically include that. So if you listened yesterday, you know what I'm gonna talk about. I'm gonna talk about the Fallout board game, which I got to play with husband and Epidemic Saturday night. I'll preface this with husband and the Epidemic were like both really into the Fallout video games. I know husband's love of it goes all the way back to the original Fallout video game. Most of what I know about the Fallout video games are dog meat can and will die. Meat bags make a physically nauseating sound when you reach into them. And bottle caps are life. That's about it. I never played them. Now, I have watched husband play a little bit of Fallout 4. Again, that game makes a ton of noises that I find obnoxious, which is why I don't often watch him play it. And it looks like this latest Fallout does actually look a lot like Skyrim, which makes sense if you're not aware. Both the Elder Scrolls series and the Fallout series are made by the same game company, Bethesda. So, yeah, I don't know much about the video game. I know you start out as a Vault Dweller. I think it's Vault 111. I don't know. I got, last year for the winter-themed holiday, I think it was last year. Might have been the year before, but I'm pretty sure it was last year. I got husband the Vault Dwellers box from ThinkGeek for the winter holiday, and which came with a hoodie and I think a hat and a metal lunchbox and just all kinds of neat things. The hoodie being the thing he likes the most. I think it's number 111 on the back. And I'm sure you've all seen the image of the little Fallout guy giving you the thumbs up. If you're not aware, so you see that little blonde guy in the games a lot, because he's like the graphic for skill ups and that kind of stuff. Just for different skill ups, he's doing different things. But the reason he's depicted winking, giving the thumbs up, is apparently back in the day with things hot and heavy with the Soviet Union. Actually, no, I don't think that's the Cold War. Is it? I don't know. You know me. History is not so much. But when there was threat of nuclear war before, that was the general rule of thumb, that if you saw a mushroom cloud and closed one eye and held your thumb out and it was smaller than your thumb, you were safe. You were not in the radiation zone. We know now that's not necessarily accurate. Radiation's bad. Very bad. But anyway, the whole concept of the Fallout video game, as I understand it, which again is very rudimentary, my understanding that is this is the world post-nuclear apocalypse. There's super mutants running around. There's radiation everywhere, so like you've got to find, I guess they're supposed to be, I don't think it's actually like outlined what exactly it's supposed to be, but I would assume they're supposed to be like iodine treatments to cure radiation. What are you doing? What are you doing, crazy? To cure radiation sickness and that kind of thing as you wander about. And there's ghouls, which I guess aren't necessarily bad guys. I don't know. So, I mentioned before, I got both Husband and Epidemic, the Fallout board game, which just released, I think, last week, for the winter holiday this year. Husband hasn't opened his yet. It hasn't been wrapped yet. He knows about it. And, of course, Epidemic's, because he pre-ordered, I just paid for his pre-order. So Epidemic brought over his copy Saturday, and that's what we played. I think the game has potential once we get the rules down. I think the rule book is very poorly organized. It did seem difficult to, like, look up things. Epidemic had read through at least some of the rule book. It does indeed come with 2 rule books, and not like how Betrayal comes with 3 books. One is the basic rule book, one is the Survivor's Guide, and one is the Betrayer's Guide. And that's because you need the scenarios from the survivor point of view and from the betrayer point of view to get that kind of like, the survivors only know this, the betrayer only knows that, and they may not know each other's win cons. No, there's legit, like, the rule book and the book of appendices, I guess. I don't know. So, that doesn't seem optimal. Though, to be fair, the original version of Betrayal at the House on Haunted Hill, which is one of my favorite board games ever, was like a folded in half sheet of paper. It was not sufficient. We were constantly looking up errata. And since the next edition, the copy we own, because that was, of course, the Epidemic's copy. The Epidemic is a real big board game buff. He has played so many and owns just a ton of them. Spartacus being another fan favorite. Mostly because the concept's pretty easy. Buy people, fight in the arena, win influence, be careful being House Badiatus. It's the house I always am, because Xena. But it's actually kind of hard to win with House Badiatus. Anyway, so originally when we played Betrayal, we were playing his copy, which was a first edition copy, which had the kind of folded in half piece of paper, and that was all you got for rules. Whereas when, I believe as a housewarming gift, the Epidemic bought us a reprinted, since they've come out with like the 2nd and 3rd edition. And it has a more substantial, robust, coherent rulebook. So I think once they have an opportunity to kind of reorganize the rules, or maybe we will, I don't know, that can make things better. Just the layout of the rulebook, I never actually opened either of the rulebooks. I left that all to Husband and Epidemic. But it seemed like there was a lot of jumping around. There was a lot of, well, but this is what I'm looking for, and it has to do with this. Why isn't it in this section, or at least referenced? Go see page 27. So, you know how it is. Whenever you're learning a new game for the first time, especially when nobody at the table actually knows how to play, it's a lot of trial and error, a little bumpy. So, yeah, there are some things we got to figure out. We ended up playing, I want to say, for like 2.5 hours, and the goal of the game is to get to 9 influence points. And basically, once you get there, you reveal all your influence points and tell everybody how you have that much influence, and there you go, you win. And I think I ended up with the most at like 7. So there are 5, I think it's 1 or 2 to 5 players. So there are up to 5 different characters you can be. and only one of them is a vault dweller. Like, I was a vault dweller. Epidemic was a feral ghoul. Husband was a wasteland survivor, or wasteland something or other. Again, not terribly familiar with the video game, so a lot of these things were very new to me. There's also a super mutant figure, which that seems pretty fun to be. And a Brotherhood of Steel reject. There's a word for it. Cast out, I guess. Again, I know nothing of what this means. And there seem to be two major factions in the game. The Railroad and the Institute. So part of your influence cards depend on either the Railroad or the Institute being higher in influence to give you more influence. And so, you pick a scenario, and there's, of course, a recommended starting scenario. So I can't imagine how much more complicated some of these get. And that starts you off tells you what board you're playing, because much like Betrayal, except Betrayal, you just take tiles from the stack until you run out of rooms in the house. It's a pieced together board with hexagon-shaped tiles, and you start out with certain tiles face up, and most of the tiles face down. So you get to complete or attempt up to 2 actions per turn. A move is an action. You get 2 movement points to go through 2 areas. Explore is an option. Now you have to explore a tile to turn it face up, and then you can move into that area if you so choose. What are the other actions? You can perform a quest action. You can have an encounter if you're at a town or an outpost. Or you can initiate combat if there's a monster in your space. I think that's all of them. I don't know. Again, this was our first run through, so things are a little bit loose. Like I said, once we have a chance to read through the rulebook, having seen some gameplay, even if we weren't playing right, which does happen with most of the board games we play, where somebody thinks they have a rudimentary understanding and they're like, okay, let's just go at this. And then as we're playing and we're looking stuff up, we get less and less patient with the looking things up, and it's like, screw it, this is kind of how this worked, and it kind of applies here, so this is just how we're going to do it for now. And then after all this, somebody, usually the Epidemic, honestly, goes through and reads the rulebook again, and now with having, some kind of questions in their mind that they want to answer, pays more attention to certain things, and we're able to get a firmer understanding of the rules. We've played the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles board game, Shadows of the Past, probably 4 or 5 times now. I'm not sure we have played a correct game yet, because it seems like every time we play, we get a little closer, and then, after the day after we get together to play, Epidemic texts, our group texts and says, oh, hey, by the way, we did this wrong. And we just kind of keep learning as we go. So, because it was the first time, it was very long and painful, because we have to look up, everything. Wait, what does this mean again? And, oh, man. I think, I honestly have a good feeling about this game once we get a little more solid on the rules. It did seem really obnoxious early on, where all I did was run around and quest for the most part. All Epidemic did was mostly run around and get into combat. husband mostly ran around and explored. And, you know, it just seemed like it was so much work to get more of the little influence cards. I'm like, my God, I've completed like 5 quests. I ended up in the end having, I want to say 4 influence cards. But I probably completed like 10 quest actions. Like, not attempted and failed a die roll or whatever, but actually completed, advanced the quest line. And everybody starts with 1 influence card. So out of all these quest actions I did, you know, I got to, you know, it's like every 3 or 4 quest actions gets you only 1 influence card. So I don't know, that seems a little like maybe that we're not doing that right, or maybe we just got bad quest lines. I don't know. So you start with your scenario, you lay out the board. And then your scenario tells you what quests start as active. And I think you only start with 1 active. And then it's kind of like choose your own adventure, where it's like, well, here's the situation. I believe we started with looking for the synths, which seem to become some kind of like, what the frick? Sorry, phone popped out. Okay. We all still here. Still got mic. Equalizer still moving. Hopefully we're all still here. Anyway, the synths seem to be, I don't know, some kind of like mutation or cyborgy kind of thing. I don't know. I really wasn't clear. So the initial quest we start with is like your 2 options are to run to, I think it was Diamond City, and, you know, ask around. Try to find an informant there, or like if you run into a synth, or you had to kill a raider. There were like 4 or 5 different monster or bad guy factions. And one of them is raiders. They're basically just outlaws, bandits. One of them is Death Claws. Their little sigil thingy looks kind of like Satan, and they were pretty badass. So like I had incidentally, I think, triggered the first quest turnover. So they're like, every quest card has so this is what's going on. You can either go this route or this route, kind of like choose your own adventure. That was the Epidemics observation. So sometimes when you complete part of it, it's a 1-for-1 deal. It closes off that quest line. You know, you have committed the party to that quest line being the thing that happened, and only opens up 1 other quest. Sometimes it opens up multiple. So like you'll finish this quest line on option B, and it tells you to get out 2 other quest cards. But all the quest cards, well, not all the quest cards, I guess. The majority of the quest cards are numbered. So it'll tell you specifically what number to get, much like a Choose Your Own Adventure book. If you're not familiar with those, then you may be too young to be listening to this. Choose Your Own Adventure books were like a big thing when I was a kid, where, you know, you'd read a couple pages in, and then like something would come up like, and you find, you know, a woman in front of a diner saying, help me, you know, I need $1. And then your options are to either ignore her and go to page 37, or, you know, take pity and give her your $1 and go to page 42. And the book just keeps bouncing back and forth like that, where every decision you make, opens a new decision tree. So I think by the end we had like 4 quests on the board that were open. Also, some of the encounters you have in town, like, there seem to be a lot of dogs that are getting yelled at by angry old ladies. And your options are to, like, defend the dog or, walk away and shop. And if you try to defend the dog and you successfully do it, it may trigger another quest line. Or, like, one of them was, you walk into town and they're, like, beating a guy, accusing him of being a synth. So you can either, walk away and ignore it and, just let people be people. Or you can step in and say, hey, whoa, what's going on here? And if you successfully turn the mob, it opens up another quest line. So it's kind of cool because, you get these dynamic games, and depending on who, hits an objective first, you can play the same scenario with a bunch of different outcomes, it seems. So I like that. I like games like that because they give you a lot of replayability, that everybody's not, like, bored as hell. Like, well, I'm going to start here with no knowledge, like character knowledge of what's going on. But, alright, so that's the quest we started with. Okay, so I'm just going to beeline to go pick up combat armor and a shotgun, because I know that once we complete this quest line, we get this other quest line and it spawns this big baddie, and I just want to be prepared for it. And start trivializing the game because you know everything that's going to happen, so you start preparing for it early. Like, I think it was the original Fable video game that was kind of like that. As you made choices to do things that were considered more good or more evil, it warped your character and it warped the gamescape. So, like, if you committed this, kind of heinous act back here, it cut off this one quest line for you and opened up this other one. So again, I like games like that because it does give you a lot of replayability. Like, it gives the feel that we're going to get to play this game a lot once we figure out what the hell we're doing and still enjoy it. It's kind of, now, Betrayal only has so many scenarios. It does have a lot of them, but with the amount of times we've played that game, because I love that game so much, we've played through most of them. So, there's identified strategy, but it's still, even though, like, we may have played through the scenario before, maybe the board setup's different this time, because especially in Betrayal, a lot of those require, like, well, you need to get to these 4 rooms and do a thing, and it's a much different strategy if those rooms are already on the board or if they haven't been revealed yet. So, and that's probably one of the reasons we played this game so much, is it just has so much replayability because there are so many ways that the game may feel kind of the same as a time we were playing before, but it is slightly different. So I do like these kind of expandable board games. Even like with the Turtles game, you only get so many kind of quest comics to start. They actually set themselves up real well for expansions, but you have the 4 Turtles, Splinter, April O'Neil, Casey Jones, and I want to say there's a 4th, like, ally character. So even though, like, we already did these scenarios, like, early on, husband would play Leonardo and Donatello, and I'd play Mikey and Raph. So we could, like, go back and replay them with other characters and see how that changes the outcome and changes the feel. And even there's if you achieve this objective, like, if the good guys win on this quest line, then it changes the setup for the next one. I'm not allowed to play Casey frickin' Jones anymore. So, yeah. Anyway, games like that allow for that kind of change and expandability and shifting You know, like, the next time we play this scenario, you know, once we figure everything out, we may decide, like, you know what, the last time we played this was the option that we triggered first, so let's avoid triggering that option and instead try to trigger this other option. You know, see what that quest line's like. See where they overlap. But yeah, I really like the feel of that kind of stuff. That it's not, like, don't get me wrong, you still get screwed by die rolls. There are, of course, special dice for this game, and you have to use the special dice, which is a little bit obnoxious. I don't quite understand the combat system. I feel like that's something we were probably doing wrong. But, you know, you'll, even, you know, once we get past the stumbling phase and, like, okay, we know what we're doing now, there are just so many, you know, different starting scenarios, and even if you're replaying the same scenario you played before, there are so many decision tree points that if, you know, last time we went with option A on the first quest, option B on the second quest, option B on the third, you know, anywhere along those lines that we complete a different objective and spawn the other decision tree, it's, you know, it's a whole new quest path. So I do recommend checking it out. Hopefully we'll get to try again, probably not until after the holidays, as I mentioned yesterday, with both husband and I and Epidemic having all kinds of holiday commitments and everything, and, you know, family life to work around and all that. We're probably all going to be busy for, like, the next month, but after that, hopefully we'll get a chance to take another crack at it and be able to develop a little more understanding. I know there was talk Epidemic may want to do a Let's Play kind of video for his channel on YouTube. You know, with us playing this game, I'd like to definitely get a firmer understanding of what's going on before we take on something like that, but should be interesting. So hopefully I'll get to talk about this game again at some point with a little more knowledge. Yeah, the only bad thing I would say about it at this point is, based on trying to play this weekend, the rulebook could use a little more organization, or a little bit more intuitive organization, but I don't know, maybe once we get the rules down, we'll see why it's laid out the way it is. So, you know, keep listening, check back, and I'll probably talk about this game in a couple months when we get a chance to play again and get a better understanding. Tomorrow I'm probably going to talk about the 2 GPs that happened this past weekend, or just maybe some of the sideline YouTube stuff, like, I watched Sam Pardee's video doing 5 Color Humans earlier this week. I watched Frank's Modern Monday video from last week, Frank Lepore. So maybe a mix of what I'm seeing people streaming on MTGO and Grand Prix coverage. But as always, if you made it this far, thank you very much for listening, and I'll talk to y'all tomorrow.